to stabilize. Okay, so good morning, everyone. Welcome to our data breakfast this Friday morning. And my name is Francesco Petruccione, and I'm responsible for you waking up early on Friday morning because we started this webinar series at the beginning of the lockdown. This morning we are very happy to have Anna Collard and Brett van Niekerk with us, and they will speak on a non-medical aspect of the COVID pandemic, but which is also very close to all of us, because almost daily we receive some suspicious emails where we have to think a second or two whether it's a legal one or if it is a scam of some sorts. Yeah. So the title of the presentation is Africa, You've Been Phished: Cybersecurity Scams and Disinformation During the COVID Pandemic. Yeah. Before I introduced Brett and Anna, I just wanted to share with you, if you join us for the first time, some basic rules of the webinar. Yeah. At the bottom, in the bottom bar, you see towards the left-hand side, there is a question and answer button, Q&A. Yeah, and you are welcome to make use of that facility to interact with the two speakers of this morning. You can post your questions there, and Brett and Anna will monitor them. I will help them as well. And at the end of the presentation, we will try to answer your questions. Yeah. Okay, then let me start by introducing Anna. Anna is currently the managing director of Popcorn Training, KnowBe4 Africa, where she drives security awareness across the African continent. She has been working in the cybersecurity field as a security architect and consultant for 18 years, where she has assisted organizations across South Africa, Europe, and the US. She founded security content publisher Popcorn Training, which is now part of KnowBe4. This is a South African company that promotes cybersecurity awareness by using innovative story-based techniques and gamification to make complex content simple to understand and easy to remember. Recently, she won the Women in Tech Innovation Throughout Africa 2020 Award for Southern and Central Africa. She holds various security certifications, and she also used to be working for Visa and Mastercard. So thank you very much, Anna, for waking up early this morning and being with us. Brett van Niekerk is a computer science academic at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. He's the chair of the International Federation of Information Processing Working Group on ICT uses in peace and war. And he's also the co-editor-in-chief of the International Journal of Cyber Warfare and Terrorism. He's also associate editor of the International Journal of Information Security and Privacy, and sits on the advisory board of the Journal of Information Warfare. So he's a warrior of sorts, it seems. And he's also based in other South African organizations. He participated in the International Research Advisory Group for the Global Commission on the Stability of Cyberspace, and is a reviewer for various organizations and journals. Yeah. Since his PhD, he focused on information operations, information security, and critical infrastructure protection. In some earlier phase of his life, he worked at Transnet as senior information security analyst, and is also a certified information security manager. So we have two very competent speakers in the area of cybersecurity this morning, and we are very glad that you're here with us. I think that Brett will be the first speaker, and he will be followed by Anna. So Brett, if I can kindly invite you to start your presentation. You know how to use the green button to share your screen.
Okay. Thank you, Prof. Good morning, everybody. So we're going to focus on cybersecurity, as well as a few other things, being disinformation and some of the scams. So I'll focus more on a very high level of what's happening in South Africa, like a national view, and then Anna will go into a bit more detail some of the aspects. So leading up to this virus, South Africa is obviously one of the leading economies in Africa, certainly the leading economy in Southern Africa. The problem is we're lagging behind in cybersecurity. So the International Telecommunications Union has ranked us 56 globally and 4th in Africa. So as one of the leading economies, falling behind is not really good. Then a recent study came out earlier this year where it ranked us as the 31st out of 76, 31st worst out of 76 countries. So again, it's giving a bit of a bleak view of our cybersecurity. And then towards the end of the last year, we started seeing more and more major attacks against South Africa. One of them included a massive attack against the city of Joburg. This wasn't unique to South Africa. Such attacks have been happening all over the world, but it just shows that because we're in Africa doesn't mean we're going to escape what's happening everywhere else. So the thing is, we're going to have to keep up with the attacks that are being seen globally, but if we're lagging behind, we're going to struggle. And then this virus happened. So it's estimated that the number of devices that were affected by cyber attacks increased tenfold immediately after the announcement of the national emergency in March. So I think it went from around 30,000 to 300,000 almost overnight because of that national emergency. And a recent report has said India in the last 3 months during the pandemic has seen over 9,000 COVID-related cybersecurity attacks. One of the biggest issues, obviously, as we've all experienced, is this rapid change from on-premise working to remote working, where it hasn't been a daily occurrence for us, and almost overnight, we've had to adapt. Some institutions, like the university, fortunately, we had already been planning prior to the announcement of the lockdown. So we had maybe a little bit of headway. Some other major organizations only started the planning the Tuesday after the lockdown was announced, which obviously meant they had to rush a lot faster. This means there's a much greater use of the internet at home, and then the online collaboration that we're seeing, even we're using Zoom now, increased dramatically, as well as the use of virtual private networks to connect to organizations. The problem is we've forced through all these technologies out of necessity, but there was still a large number of vulnerabilities in a lot of the software, or maybe the implementations. So this could be used by the attackers. One of the key things in the news is Zoom bombing. So I'll go into that in a little bit more detail later. But in addition to that, is now a market amongst cyber criminals for compromised accounts and possible vulnerabilities for both Zoom and Microsoft Teams, as well as a few of the others that are being actively sold online. Then in addition to this, what's even more worrying is the health and research organizations are being attacked. The first major one was a Czech hospital, and it was their lead hospital in their efforts against the pandemic, was affected by ransomware. So what happens is this virus will encrypt the hard drives and lock all the data. Subsequently, the Czech government has released additional warnings around possible attacks, and about a day or two later, again, their hospitals experienced attacks. World Health Organization is experiencing daily attempts, and I'll show a screenshot. Their emails have also been affected quite badly. And then there's also been reports of state-sponsored cyber espionage, targeting research around, especially trying to get the vaccines or cures and so on. Initially, it was by the US and the UK, and subsequently, I've seen the warnings coming out of Canada. So they're warning basically all research organizations, hospitals, and universities. Some news reports attributed it to Russia, China, and North Korea, or Iran, so the usual suspects. but I don't think there has been any real firm indication around the actual countries behind this. So just as an example, on the top left, the World Health Organization, their email credentials, so their logins to their emails were leaked and disclosed. On the top right is again the warning, or a news report about the warning from the UK. This is the National Cybersecurity Center. And then in the bottom left is actually some of the statistics from them that they launched a campaign for users to report any malicious cyber campaigns. In the first 24 hours, they took down 80 malicious campaigns and received over 5,000 reports. So you can imagine those is what's being reported, or what's actually happening is going unreported. And the bottom right is just an example that some of an APT is an advanced persistent threat. So it's just a more advanced type of attacker, and they tend to go not necessarily after the general user, but more targeted type of attacks to either steal more money or for espionage or something. And they're seeing the coronavirus as it says, a golden opportunity. And we'll explain why that is in a few slides time. So the main issue is most cyber attacks to catch up people will have some form of scam component to it. So it could range from a compromised fake infection maps that someone will click on to the standard phishing emails. And this is really where those types of lures are used, where they would use the coronavirus theme to try and get your attention to click on something you normally wouldn't. And I will deal with that aspect in much more detail. But what's happened now is privacy has become a huge concern. Obviously, Zoom has been used very widely by governments, many corporates, as well as educational institutes. And now the fact that there's been vulnerabilities and active attacks, obviously in Zoom bombing, that they're there to be unpleasant, and I've experienced it, it really is unpleasant. But the other side is, what if you have a few hundred participants, who's to say they're all legitimate if you're discussing something rather sensitive? So someone could just be sitting there and listening to potentially confidential information. Obviously, Zoom has made a drastic effort to try and improve their security. That they've been doing almost daily updates in some cases. They've added additional encryption and a number of features. But the problem is Zoom bombing still happens. And that's because the users aren't really aware of how the features work and how to use them properly to be able to secure the meetings. And I think that's one of the issues, again, where awareness is very, very important. And the other issue now is the whole threat of a surveillance state and a police state. Is because of the concern of the virus, they're trying to track people who are possibly infected. So the issue becomes now the privacy around that person, of how far is this tracking and tracing going, what information is being gathered, and that kind of thing. And then obviously, if someone is potentially in contact, you start tracking and tracing them, and so on. And this is a type of issue that actually has been legally fought over drastically by intelligence agencies when there's a person of interest. But now we're doing this almost de facto because of the threat of the virus. So the issue becomes things like the right to know to the right to privacy. So just a hypothetical scenario, if a staff member of some organization tests positive, an organization might say, yes, we've got a case, but not necessarily release the name of the person. Now, the issue becomes, obviously, the right to privacy means that name should be withheld. On the opposite side, everyone else in the organization who might have come into contact with this person or been in the department, not necessarily direct contact, but maybe could have touched something they've touched, gone to the same bathroom or kitchen or something like that, kind of needs to know that that person's been tested positive, because they could have now been exposed. So you have a right to know as well. So it's become this kind of fine line between what to release and what not to release, and how to deal with this information. And also, obviously, organizations are legally allowed to try and gain information from the employees about their risk level, let's call it that, in terms of exposure to the virus. But whilst they're legally allowed to do that under law, and people can't lie, also by law currently, the problem is they still need to do it in a reasonable manner where you respect the person's privacy. And I've seen some shocking examples of how it's not done like that. And then just another complete diversion is, if you think that the SANDF orders to deploy were openly distributed on social media before the official announcement of the lockdown. So that this again shows that something that should have really been kept confidential, someone leaked it. Now, okay, it kind of gave us a heads up, this probably is going to be a lockdown. But if you take it in more of a futuristic scenario where there is maybe a military operation that's supposed to be secret, something like that being leaked could have very severe consequences for the lives of those soldiers. So just again, some examples of what's been happening and what the news has been saying. Top left happened last week or the week before. A parliamentary meeting was experienced some Zoom bombing, racial abuse, some explicit content and so on. And as I say, it really is experienced. Top right, just Microsoft trying to patch some of the vulnerabilities they've discovered. Bottom left, again, the US Attorney General, so the government's actively getting involved, trying to push Zoom, Microsoft, some of the other social media companies to do things like try and crack down on disinformation, to try and secure their systems to prevent attacks and so on. And then bottom right again, South African government releasing a warning, especially to the NGO sectors around possible scams and fraud targeting them. So the scams and so on, obviously, and the phishing emails use certain techniques which try and influence people to click on a link or perform some action, give out your username and password that you normally wouldn't do. And it's very, very similar techniques are being used to what's being colloquially called fake news. Now, I don't really like that term. And there's some examples. There's a book by Richard Stengel called Information War, How We're Losing the Information Battlefield. So he was actually a US in the Department of State, and he was leading the fight against Russian and ISIS social media disinformation and messaging. So he's been right on the front lines. And he's also raised concerns around this fake news. So just some examples of what we've experienced is, I mean, there was a voice note going around a couple of days before the lockdown was announced, saying, we're going to have this lockdown, you're not going to be able to buy stuff, you know, you need to go out shopping and buy everything you need for like a month. So really inciting panic buying. And what sort of took me off immediately that there was a problem was it's one of those vague, you're a friend of a friend story. So this one was, you're a friend of mine, like a good friend of mine, his wife works at a school where Minister William McKee's children go to school. But his children aren't at school, they're both out of school. So immediately there was a sort of a clue that there was something not quite right with that voice note. But there's been warnings, especially in South Africa, about student funding, that NSFAS students wouldn't get the funding, which obviously had to be refuted very quickly because they were panicking. And the obvious medical misinformation that we've been getting. So quite a few people have spoken about that. It's quite blatant that there is some real nonsense out there. But there's a number of challenges, and this is one of the reasons why I don't like the term fake news. Is sometimes it's not necessarily fake. It's just put into a different context, or it might be 99% true, but there's just one small element that's incorrect, which might be the incitement for panic or something like that. But one of the biggest challenges that we are facing is that there's been severe inconsistent messages from experts in government. So if you just go down to some shopping malls, you might see one chain say, based on advice from the World Health Organization, we are not going to be wearing face masks and gloves. On one of the other sides, you have another store saying, because of the World Health Organization, we are wearing gloves and masks. So completely different approaches to the situation based on advice from the same place. And when you have some governments saying don't wear masks, some saying do wear masks, some saying some medication will work, others not, the message is so blurred that it makes people vulnerable to other forms of disinformation. Another issue, your instant messaging. So it's not really news, it's just stuff distributed. So WhatsApp, Telegram, and all those types of things is encrypted. So governments can't really trace back the source of the fake information campaigns. Users can report it, but you only can really report the person that sent it to you. So you have to find the person that sent to them, and then so on and so on. So it's really, really difficult to trace back the source. And as I said, some of it's not necessarily completely incorrect. It could just be framed in a context to achieve some objective, like panic buying, maybe, as we see in the US and a few other places, protests against lockdown. So it could be inciting things like that. And a number of the responses, and I think the South African response falls into this category, are reactive. They're assuming a traditional media type of production line that you go through an editor, and then they vet everything, and then they sort of post the media, and there's a formal complaint saying that we don't like that, so please take it down, which kind of works, obviously for traditional media if it's on a web page. For social media, a bit more difficult, especially if it's in a private message, and when you work with instant messaging, your WhatsApp and so on, that just will not work. So you need more of a cybersecurity type response or approach to disinformation, where you actively try and hunt the infrastructure that's being used to distribute these types of messages and try and block them at the source, rather than a reactive end user approach where you only get the symptoms and not the actual disease. And as an example of this, is what's actually happening is they use similar infrastructure to what you would for like a distributed denial of service attack, so a heavy cyber attack. Same type of stuff is being used to now distribute propaganda and disinformation. So that they've got automated systems which will pump out these types of messages onto social media and so on. So for a human to be able to respond to that individually is going to be almost impossible. The stuff's going out faster and wider than any human can deal with. And just as an example, China, when they were giving out equipment to some of the European countries, they were actually using similar techniques to push out propaganda to try and sway perception in a positive light towards them. So similar mechanisms can be used for political campaigns and so on. And if you think that the techniques that the psychological techniques that they use are pretty much the same as someone would use in a political campaign, or even a product marketing, is ultimately a toothpaste manufacturer wants to influence you to buy their particular brand of toothpaste rather than somebody else's. So it's a sort of a similar concept that they try and play on similar human traits for that. And the other side is the deep fakes. So you can use deep learning to create very, very, really realistic fakes. We've seen this becoming prevalent in some political spheres. So a smear campaign can make a political opponent say or do something on video that never actually really happened. And they're having cases where they've used a deep fake audio recording of I think it was a CEO or a CFO or something like that, and sent it to employees basically to get them to transfer funds. So there was actually a financial impact at the end of this, that they managed to trick someone into transferring funds or making a payment. The whole thing is now these are very, very difficult to be able to detect by a human. And as you can see in the article, it's a threat to elections, but society as a whole. It enables the scams and things especially if there's some form of interactivity, to be far more realistic, far more believable, and something someone might click on. So if you have what we call clickbait, some image of a prominent celebrity or political figure doing something shocking, you might, early in the morning or just got into work, haven't had your coffee yet, accidentally click on something like that. Oh, I wonder what's happening here. And that's exactly what they want you to do. Is that just that moment of distraction, and you click on something that you really shouldn't. So just to summarize before I hand over to Anna, obviously this pandemic now has had a massive impact. Society has had to change. The way we work has had to change. And we've seen a major shift to online work from home type characteristics, where you're no longer protected by corporate firewalls. You're no longer protected by all the technical tools that are usually available in a normal corporate environment. And the problem is you're still using work laptops and work systems that you could then potentially become a very big risk, not immediately, but you could still, your laptop could be compromised with a virus or somewhat thing. You go back into work and you take that into onto the work network. Obviously, the corresponding increase in cyber attacks and the scams and stuff is actually of a proportion that is really unprecedented. But also the increasing sophistication is something that we have to worry about. The techniques and technologies and the push that these threat actors are using is becoming quite worrying. So one of the key things, which is very, very important, also why we decided to have this webinar, is the awareness for general users becomes very, very important, so that they're at least aware of what's out there and will just think before clicking on something that they really shouldn't. So I think that's a very good opportunity now for Anna to take over, and she will focus on some of the scams and the awareness in far more detail.
Thank you very much, Brett. And while Anna sets up the screen share facility, I just want to encourage our participants to engage with the presentation of Brett through the question and answer button that you find at the bottom of the screen. So Anna, thank you very much. It's over to you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be part of this webinar. It's something that's very close to my heart. Security awareness and helping people to understand what we're dealing with is what we do. I work for a company called KnowBe4, and that's pretty much all they do. Like, we don't sell technology or any other thing. The only thing we do is help companies train their users to be more cybersecurity aware. I'm going to jump over my intro because Francesca, thank you very much for doing that. And what I will cover is a little bit around why Africa is such an attractive market to the cyber criminals themselves. Some of the COVID-19 threats that Brett already alluded on, I'll show you quite a few examples on how we can spot the red flags that give those away, and then a few more tips on how to keep safe while we are working at home. So we often say that, being in Africa makes us a low-hanging fruit. And the reason being is that cyber criminals have really started to shift their focus away from the sort of industrial nations to the emerging economies. And if we look at the people of Africa and how the internet penetration, how that is increasing, it's a wonderful thing on the one hand side, but it's quite scary to think that at the moment we have 500 million people that are online, and that number is going to double in the next 2 years. That's amazing, but we have to consider that a lot of those people that are coming online are often first-time users. They have never been exposed to computer usage. They're using their mobile devices now for financial transactions, mobile banking, but they've never even been told that there's such a thing as a scam or a phishing attack, etc. So for cyber criminals to break into a market, they need a 20% internet penetration. in South Africa, we obviously, we have a much higher rate than that. And across the continent, our internet penetration is going to literally double in the next 2 years. And that's a little bit of a ticking time bomb if we don't help the people on the ground to understand what they're dealing with. The other issue we have in Africa is that only a handful of the 53 plus minus countries have legal framework in place to actually prosecute criminals should they be caught. Again, that makes it, a happy place for criminals if they know they can sit here and not even be, there's no impact to them. And a lot of that makes sense if we think about governments having, bigger fish to fry. They're fighting poverty, war zones, youth unemployment, etc. And they haven't quite caught on that cybercrime is actually just as much of a big problem to society. And then also something that makes us unique in terms of challenges is that, yes, there's a global skill shortage around cybersecurity professionals, but it's especially dire in Africa, where we only have 10,000 security professionals across the whole continent. Now, the company Oracle, for example, has 10,000 security professionals just working for them. We have 10,000 across everybody on the continent. And I know it firsthand, I used to work for a company called Dimension Data, where we brought in a lot of youngsters and sort of, skilled them up. As soon as they had a certain skill level, they were poached by Dimension Data internally, by their US or European division. So often when South African talent comes up, they gain experience, they then immigrate overseas. So that's another thing that I'm quite passionate about, is to get more youngsters and people excited about joining the cybersecurity space. It's an amazing area to be in, and we need more people to help us keep Africa safe. So what we did as KnowBe4 in November last year, we went out and we interviewed about 900 people across 8 different African countries. To see, okay, what is the issue really on the ground? Like, how much do people know? How much are they aware of? What don't they know? And more than half of the respondents said that they're actually quite confident that they would recognize a security incident. That's good news. However, when you do these kind of surveys, you often put these like qualifying questions in place. And what happened is when you dug a little bit deeper, is that even though the people said they're confident that they would recognize a security incident, and they admitted that more than half had malware infections before, or 30% fell for phishing emails before, more than 65% didn't know what ransomware is. Half of them didn't know what something, that's a very basic control that we recommend everybody to do, is to apply multi-factor authentication. Now, on the one hand side, we have people that are saying, "Oh no, I'm confident. I know what I'm doing." But on the same side, they actually aren't aware of some of the most common threats and security controls out there, and that's a problem, because what we're dealing with is this whole issue of unconscious incompetence. So that's like, I'm consciously incompetent when it comes to cricket. My husband plays cricket and I still haven't gotten the rules to it. So I know I don't know anything about it. Unconscious incompetence is that area where, you may not even know that you don't know. And that's the case with a lot of the African users on the ground, including South Africa, by the way. So South Africa was one of the countries that was part of this survey, is that people think they know more about something, or they're not even aware that they should know more when it comes to their digital safety or cybersecurity. Another interesting fact is, most of you will think, phishing, is such an old hat, and but unfortunately, it is still pretty much the #1 factor, or sort of attack vector that bad guys are using to get into networks or steal information. So there's a report called the Verizon Data Breach Investigations Report that comes out every year, and like the 2019 report confirmed again that phishing was used in 32% of the cases, closely followed by malicious software infections and then use of stolen credentials, which coincidentally, both of these are mostly obtained through phishing as well. So the human aspect of cybersecurity is such an important key element. and is often like sort of overlooked or not prioritized enough in security projects. Something that we do when we help organizations to keep their users aware is we use something called mock phishing or phishing simulations. Because it's a great metric to test how are people faring, how many of them are falling for these phishing simulations, but also it's a right in the moment training exercise, because especially the guys and girls who think they would never fall for phishing emails, when they do happen to fall for one of those simulated phishing attacks, it makes it very real for them that, geez, this is something that I need to pay more attention. And when we go into an organization for the first time, we call this a baseline phish. And across the South African or the African organizations that we deal with, the average hit rate or the average phish-prone percentage is 29%. That means every third person in an organization or in a company that we send these mock phishes to falls for a phishing email. And what's quite scary is that specific industries, like you would think the financial industry should be more aware, because they have been running cybersecurity programs for years. They're not faring well at all, and unfortunately, in the times that we're seeing, like this COVID pandemic, the healthcare industry is one of the worst when it comes to awareness and falling for scams. And unfortunately, they're also the ones that are highly targeted at the moment. And that's something where you think, well, from a humanitarian point of view, do these bad guys not have a conscience? And funny enough, like some of the ransomware groups have actually come out with press releases to say, okay, well, we put a break on this. We won't target hospitals specifically. How much you can trust that, it's like, how much do you trust a thief? But it's interesting to see that even, and this is the press release that came out from Doppelpaymer. Maze, it's a very famous ransomware group, or infamous rather, I should say. They also released something that they would not target hospitals. But a lot of the other ones are just saying, look, they're not specifically out there to target hospitals, but they also, it's like opportunistic. If the hospitals fall for it, they have to pay for it. So there's not much of a conscience there. Brett alluded to it, why are we at higher risk right now? And there's a couple of elements that feed into it. One is, when you work from home, especially at times like this, and I can attest to that, if you're a parent, you get distracted by your children all the time. You now have to use your device to do online schooling and work. Your stress levels and anxiety levels are going up, and all of that puts us what we call into heuristic thinking mode. That means, we don't really, when we receive incoming messages, be that via WhatsApp or email, we're not as able to use our critical thinking and look at things properly, but we rather react to it very sort of instinctively, and that often makes us make the wrong decisions. And what these bad guys are using is emotional tactics to sort of trigger our amygdala or fear system. And then, if you, let's say you receive, and that's like a real scam, if you receive like a blood test result that says, oh, you're positive, you even though you may not ever have donated the blood or given the blood, your first reaction is like, oh my God, and let me have a look. And this is exactly the kind of, those psychological tricks that the bad guys are using. And because we're in this collective stressed out situation, it makes us as humans much more vulnerable. And then coupled with that is, the phishing frenzy that is going on, and the increase in attacks that's making the rounds. So there are various statistics from different providers, but the fact is that phishing and malicious websites have increased drastically since January this year. And I'm just going to show you a few of the examples. And obviously, Brett also mentioned that there's like a lot of sort of misinformation, fake information, and a lot of sort of standard spams and scams that are making the rounds, trying to sell you stuff that's not existing. Those are, in most times, they're fairly easy to spot. the other thing that is, you know, unfortunately, again, you think, well, why do these people not have conscience? Well, they don't. That's why they're criminals. They set up fake charities, organizations. They know that people feel empathy at the moment with the you know, the people like working in healthcare or the ones that are in poverty. So they're setting up these like fake charities and non-existing NPOs to try and scam you out of your money. So again, I think the tip here is to only ever, first of all, never to click on a link, but then also to like manually search for your chosen, you know, like charity organization, and make sure that that organization is legit, that you get your tax certificate, etc. Yeah, fake news spread, spoke about that, so I'm just going to jump over that. So those are sort of the basic level of scams that are making the rounds, and then we're going into the more malicious, not that the other ones aren't malicious too, but the very damaging ones that either distribute malicious software or malware or aim to steal your login details. Why do they want to do that? Well, once they've got your email credentials, for example, it's very easy to then reset all your other login details. So I always tell my friends and family, look, your email credentials or accounts, that is your digital identity, because it's very likely that you use your email to reset your, you know, like your iTunes accounts, your Amazon accounts, like everything else is in there. Your financial institutions will probably send you email notifications. So it's so critical to have a strong password and multi-factor authentication on your Gmail accounts. And then obviously the same applies for your your work account. It's absolutely critical. So some of the phishing emails that are, you know, making the rounds, trying to steal your credentials or to get you to download malicious software. This is an example, you know, like a fake update by the World Health Organization. How would you spot that? Well, first of all, you know, if you get emails from the World Health Organization, they don't tend to send out emails to just everybody. That's the first, you know, giveaway. And then if you hover over the link, you'd see it wouldn't take you to the World Health Organization's domain. There's also been phishing emails that impersonated the local government. So there again, like, and this is what I, you know, so often comes down to critical thinking and sort of taking a breather and sort of considering, okay, what does this message do? So in this case, if you haven't applied for payment, you know, or relief, first of all, that would have to be done in most cases if you're an organization through your bank, you know. So, and even as an individual, if you haven't applied for anything, you would not get a payment, right? If you had applied, that would probably come from a different domain. So the first thing is to like sort of think about it. Well, have I expected this? Does this make sense in terms of context? And then again, if you hover over the link, it does not take you to any like sort of a South African government site, but some dodgy, don't want to discriminate now, but some dodgy other country where you know, the criminals are hosting this. Another thing that is really ugly, and again, it speaks to abusing or hacking our human emotions, is an email that says, there's photos of your colleagues infected with COVID. Now, you know, curiosity killed the cat. We humans, we're all curious. And I tell you, like a lot of people, privacy or not, they are curious and they would fall for this. Sometimes it's, you know, this is, again, it's quite a basic one because it hasn't spoofed the organization's domain. They do that as well, where they actually spoof an organization's domain. So it looks like you're getting it from internal. Again, common sense, would your internal, you know, HR department send out something like that? Probably not. And then to always look at the domain when they're using anything that triggers your emotion, that is a giveaway. In this case, you know, there's some purchasing department that sends this out, so the logic, this doesn't make sense. Fake Zoom notifications, the same applies for MS Teams. Those tools, because they're so popular, are highly targeted at the moment. And when I say targeted, it's not that the tools are being hacked. It's the people using the tools are being targeted with fake phishing emails. Their credentials have been harvested from previous data breaches. So this is a fake Zoom notification. How would you pick that up? First of all, the sending domain didn't come from zoom.com. Again, if you haven't, like in this case, for example, I know that Francesco set up the webinar, so I'm expecting him to send me a Zoom invite, but if I just get a random Zoom invite, I don't accept that, right? And then again, when you hover over the link, it does not take you to zoom.com. We've seen, email spoofing or impersonating the actual company's domains. In this case, it could be like a update about, COVID or work from home plans. Again, always like sort of questioning everything, even if it looks like it comes from somebody from the internal organization. Would your internal organization send you something encrypted, verify the address? Sometimes what happens is it may look like it comes from an internal organization. If you hit reply, you'll see that it actually goes to an external sender. The fake MS Teams notifications, this is one I just want to go in a little bit more detail. And I know that most of you are probably, you either, computer science students, or you're part of a data breakfast, so you're interested in IT and how to interpret a domain is very basic for you. But you'd be surprised how few people actually understand how to read a URL string. So I'm just going to share this with you, and maybe you can then share that with your families or your friends. If we look at this particular scam here, so it looks like it's a Microsoft Teams update. I've been invited to some project. And if I hover over the link here, I see it is taking me to which at first glance looks like, hey, there's Microsoft Online on here, right? MicrosoftOnline.com. But let's just have a look properly that this is a bad link, and why is that? What they're doing is then once you click on it, they will then, and they're using a lot of redirects to confuse you, to then take you to some, again, this is obviously not a Microsoft domain, some fake site to harvest your login credentials. See, this is taking you to Corp Sugar or somewhere. So if we look at the, we hover over that Microsoft Teams link, if we look at that in detail, what I usually, when I speak to non-technical people, the way I try to explain this is, okay, if you break up a domain or a URL, think of it like a physical address. So the primary domain is like the big house that sits on the street. And then whatever is in front of it is the subdomain, which is like a department. And then whatever is, behind the / is a subdirectory, or like files in the department. So if we apply that now to, the Microsoft Office 365 world, then the actual main address, the main office house, so to speak, on the street is the office.com, right? So whatever is in front of the first / that is your main address, or the main sort of, registered address. If I look at this, it's login-office.com. That's no longer office.com. This is taking me to a completely different site, right? Because the total address changed from office.com to login-office.com. It's not a subdomain either, it's an actual domain. So if we apply that to that example that I used, and we always have to look at what is the word in front of the first / and even though I've got MicrosoftOnline.com somewhere there, this is just subdomains, and then the actual main domain is lampazu.cl, which is in Chile. So this is actually where this link is taking us. All of that is just gumph in front of it. And a lot of people have no idea how to interpret URLs. So it's really important when you show your friends, hey guys, look, this is how you look at a link, and you need to find the actual server, the domain that this is taking us, by looking at the thing that matters. So there we go. Another thing that the bad guys are doing is, and this is obviously a bit more sophisticated because they have to break into people's email accounts first, but it's easy to use stolen credentials or to get people to fall for like a harvesting attack. Then they're sitting in the people's inboxes and they're just sitting there like waiting ducks. And as soon as something comes in that's got anything to do with payments, with invoices, they intercept those emails and they change the banking details. This is a real example of like a local fund management house where the financial advisor was hacked, and then obviously there's the bad guys, you know, pretending to be the financial services institution and changing the banking details. A lot of agents also, you know, like brokers or people that sell houses are falling victim to this kind of scam. So what is the message here? Whenever you have anything to do with payments, especially if somebody requests a change of banking details, never ever trust emails. Even if it looks legit, just give that person a call or use WhatsApp to say, hey, did you really change your banking details? Show me like proof of bank account, etc. This is such a rife scam that's making the rounds everywhere. So please warn your friends too. Other thing that we've seen is bad guys selling malware kits that include a live version of the, you know, the John Hopkins COVID map. And that then results in people actually distributing the malicious software on their legitimate websites. So again, I think as a user, just be very wary to only use either the John Hopkins page itself or reputable sites like Worldometer or something to check your COVID stats. There's been malicious apps that pretend to show you infections in your areas. Once you install that app, it will actually, there's two versions of it. One is that it will sort of track everything you do. It will even listen to your microphone and try, you know, grab your camera. And then others will sort of encrypt everything and demand ransom so that you can get your information back. The message here is, again, only download from reputable app stores. And even then, be careful, you know, like, and clean up your apps as well. Like something that you don't need anymore, get rid of it. I try and keep my apps as few as possible. Other things that we've seen is fake tender or sort of requests that are coming in via LinkedIn. So these scammers also sitting on LinkedIn and trying to trick us. CEO fraud, that talks to, again, impersonating somebody within an organization and then trying to rope, you know, the other people into falling for what they call a wire transfer scam, or like a false payment to an invoice, like paying an invoice that doesn't exist, for example. The reason why these work so well is, as you can imagine, if they impersonate the CEO or somebody high standing, people pay attention. You know, again, it talks to our emotion. Oh, there's authority. I better, like, you know, it's urgent. I better act on that without thinking it through. And you'd be amazed how much money these bad guys are doing. You know, like, you'd think big organizations have all these controls in place, which they do. But sometimes what happens if the person receives an email from the CEO that says, I need this payment done urgently, they just do it. So in summary, you know, like, yes, there are these red flags, and you can also look at message headers, etc. But at the end of the day, it always comes back to, well, when you receive anything, regardless whether it comes in via WhatsApp, Facebook, or Instagram, email, etc., just take a breather. Just takes 10 seconds to sort of enable our slow thinking brain rather than the heuristic brain, and look at it critically. You know, and I know that this may sound like, well, we don't have the time in this mad rush world, but it's worth it, especially if it invokes a feeling. The other thing Brett alluded to, credential stuffing. So this talks to if you've used your password across multiple sites, and then if one of those sites has been breached before, then your credentials are out there for sale. And the bad guys, for example, what happened with that whole Zoom, Zoom was in the press a lot about, and people don't realize like that 500 million Zoom accounts are out for sale. Wow, Zoom must be insecure. No, it has nothing to do with Zoom. It's the fact that these people are using the same passwords across multiple sites. So they used a password on a breach site before, and then they reused it on Zoom. And the bad guys have automated tools to reuse those or run those passwords against any kind of account. So best practices, obviously don't reuse your passwords, apply multi-factor authentication wherever you can, literally, like, and it's so easy with I've got Google Authenticator, and you just add it wherever it's possible. Using a password manager. And some people may say, well, but and I don't want to put my banking password in the password manager. That's fine, and maybe have your most critical accounts that you still remember by using a phrase or something very long that you can remember and that's unique, and then put all your other accounts in the password manager. And another suggestion is to not use your business email on personal sites. Another thing you could do is go to haveibeenpawned.com and just check how many times has your email been breached on other sites before. And if it appears there, just make sure you change your password, not just on that site, but across all the other sites too. Working from home, and I'm rushing a little bit, Francesca, because I know I've only got a minute left. So obviously, number one is being aware of the scams that are out there. Remember, passwords are the new key. So use a password manager and two-factor authentication. Securing your home Wi-Fi, make sure it's not admin. And obviously apply like, WPA2 or some security standards so that it's not unencrypted. I think that's pretty basic nowadays, but again, a lot of people don't know, and they just have the telecom guy come and set up the router for them. Always apply updates. Like I said earlier on, most of the breaches happen either because people fall for phishing emails or for malicious software, and that can be prevented through proper patching and applying updates. And then when you use a VPN, I think again the point there is don't just use a free VPN and like any VPN that's out there, because then you may sort of trade your encryption with the information that they may host somewhere that you don't want to, or that they sell for marketing purposes. So just do a little bit of research and then pay maybe a little bit to have a proper VPN, and help raise awareness, speak to your families, your children, also important, they do online schooling. If any of you have children yet, I don't know how many students are in the call. And yeah, don't trust anything you haven't expected, even from people that you know. Limit what you share about yourself online. That's a lot of the time that the criminals are harvesting this information. They've got bot or little programs that they're using to do that automatically, that goes out and searches, what can I find about Francesco, let's say, on social media, and then let me build a scam that uses that information, so he's more likely to fall for it. Password practices we spoke about, keeping software updated. Those are the top 3 tips. It's really awareness, passwords, and keeping your software up to date. And that is really it from my side. We have a lot of free material available. I'm sharing the links here where you can download even this, like a little video we created for people working at home that is available for free. There's a kit for children or parents to, talk about it with their children. And if you follow our blog at KnowBe4.com, that's very educational. We post every day about what's going on. We also have an app called CyberHaste app that is a proper, not malicious app, that summarizes everything that's going on in the cybersecurity world in like a nice condensed version, which is quite interesting. And that is really it from my side. Thank you so much. So Africa is targeted. Let's be aware of it. Don't fall for COVID phishing, and help raise awareness amongst your friends and family. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Anna, for the very, very informative and helpful presentation. And of course, thank you to Brett as well. And Anna and Brett has been fantastic in covering everything from the overview of the dangers. I wanted to say out there, but they're more in there in your inbox, yeah, and even giving us very precious advice in how to protect ourselves. Some of you may have noticed that Anna and Brett have also been fantastic at answering already all your questions, because they did a brilliant work in answering everything in the question and answer facility. But maybe a question to both of you, Anna and Brett. From the questions that you received and already answered, is there maybe one or two that where you would like to share your answer with our wider audience?
I'm just trying to, maybe I'll let Brett speak while I'm reading them.
For instance, there was a question by one of the participants on if you are aware of a scam, how do you report it, or where do you report it? How do you have to behave in case you want to share with others the danger?
Yeah. So if you do receive a scam, for instance, if it's pretending to be from your bank, the best option would be to contact the bank that it's pretending to be. Most banks have a special email address or contact form or something like that for you to report scams, etc., for them to respond to. If it's disinformation, there's a site called the Real 411. I'm just trying to find my answer to get the full URL. So that they are working for the like a media monitoring agency in South Africa. So then if it's disinformation, they will then go and assess it. If it's on either WhatsApp or email or something, go and at least create a counter message, or if it's on like a news site, a website, something like that, ask the host to take it down. You know, some of the other types of emails that you get that are just random, you can try and block them so they go into your junk. UKZN does have Mimecast, so it should filter out some of the ones there. Then in that case, you can always report it to RCS, and then they can make a move at using the Mimecast system to try and block more and more of the scams if they do make it through there. Yeah, I think there's another one worth discussing as well around the trust in technology, and you know, how confident are we that all these technologies can't be used by governments for spying? And one of the things that I don't, Anna's answer is correct, that the companies that are doing this have a brand. They have to protect their brand. So if they get caught out doing this, and there have been some allegations, it severely damages their brand, and that the number of users drop off. So it's unlikely they will use it specifically for US spying or something like that, that is outside of the law. The issue does become that there are search and seizure type laws as well. So if you're using a cloud provider, sometimes the data center that you select as a corporate user is important. As a private user, like using a Gmail or something like that, you can't really select which data center you're using. So it's not necessarily only spying, it could be search and seizure, but that very concern is what was used against China, like Huawei and ZTE and those companies, is that the American government was raising those types of concerns around 5G equipment and so on, which then resulted in a bit of a trade war between the two. So it's not only just us as individuals having those concerns, governments have the same concern as well of what they implement in their infrastructure. So it is an ongoing battle. It's very difficult to prove whether they're doing it or not. But to be honest, the safest way not to be spied on when using a computer or the internet is don't use a computer or the internet. We're going to have to kind of run the risk that maybe there is someone. But if you're really using sensitive information, use encryption. The company that you're working with should be able to provide some basic encryption. Otherwise, so what if the knows you trading recipes with your sister. That's not a national security issue.
Yeah, thank you, Brett. And maybe Anna, do you have some final practical advice for our audience? You mentioned the multi-factor authentication, the password managers, the VPNs. Do you have some final piece of advice for us to stay safe on this side of the COVID crisis?
I think the biggest one really is, and this has nothing to do with technology, it comes back to using our common sense. And I always say, breathe before you click, like take those 5 seconds when you receive something, don't react to it. Be aware of our brain's ability to sometimes make us react, without thinking. And especially at times like these where we might be stressed or dealing with challenges at home. So just to be mindful of that and try and be more present, that's as difficult as it might be in those situations.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Anna. Then I'm getting aware of the time, and I would like now to thank our 2 speakers for the very instructive and full of practical advice presentation that we will all keep in mind and put in practice every day. I would also like to thank, of course, all the participants that woke up early to take part in this data at breakfast, and we will announce the next one shortly. And finally, I would also like to thank the people behind the scenes of data at breakfast that make it all happen. Yeah. So thank you very much to you as well. So I wish you then all a very nice and safe day, and hopefully a very nice weekend too that starts just now. Yeah. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Anna. Thank you, Anna.
Thank
you,
you.
Brett.
Bye.